Chapter 9. The Fires of Rebellion. The next morning, the warriors gathered on the eastern deck of the tree fortress for breakfast. The open-air setting provided a wonderful view of the forest below. Everything looked beautiful and serene. From such a vantage point, one would never guess that at that very moment, various parts of the forest were being ravaged by war. Indeed, such breathtaking scenery could take one's mind off many things, but not everything. As Ectheon looked out over the sea of emerald and gold, he wondered if his family was safe in the besieged city of Argion. Would he return in time to save Teluvia? And if he did, would things ever be the same? He thought also of the lovely Princess Sarah, trapped in a prison at Ursus, helplessly awaiting her death. How he hoped they would succeed in rescuing her. He could not bear the thought of someone so beautiful being so cruelly destroyed. At midday, the two armies set off on their respective missions. Ardred and the archers headed north to position themselves along the road near Norfolk. Meanwhile, Dyaxes and Tamark began their journey west to the Ursul port city of Ambrose. As the elven army, led ironically by two humans, headed west through the dense foliage of the Elcadian forest, Cerberus pondered the fate of their mission. Dyaxes seemed to be putting a great deal of faith in the young king. The entire outcome of the campaign rested on Tamark's ability to gain the support of the Ursuls and rouse them into a rebellion against Urkai and his brutal regime. If things went badly, it could become a dangerous place for a person of Cerberus's race to be. Indeed, many shared the prince's concerns. The course of action they were taking left much to chance, and they were placing themselves at great risk by doing so. What if Tamark was underestimating the Ursul's loyalty to Urkai? What if the fear they lived in was too great for them to rise above and overcome? Even Tamark doubted his ability to motivate his people. One of the greatest dangers of traveling through the western portion of the forest was the chance of crossing paths with a supply line of the Ursul army. Scouts were sent ahead to prevent any such undesirable encounter. On one occasion, the scouts had a run-in with a band of Ursul soldiers headed for Ildor. The archers had the advantage of surprise and managed to kill all but one of the Ursuls. The thought of the surviving soldier notifying the main army about the rebels' actions worried Dyaxes. "Do not be distressed over it," Tamark said. "We often attack the Ursul supply lines. They are far too busy at Ildor to comb the forest in search of us." Still, the elves could not dismiss the possibility of running into a stray Ursul patrol group. With this in mind, a band of scouts encircled the traveling army to protect all flanks from a surprise attack. Fortunately, there were no more encounters with enemy troops. The army soon reached the edge of the forest and began its march on the Ursul plains. The flat, grassy land extended for miles without interruption. The nature of the terrain was an additional danger for the elves. There were no trees to hide in, and the Ursul horsemen would have little trouble catching up to the elven army, which was traveling on foot. They passed several farmhouses as they neared the town of Ambrose. Most of the Ursuls fled into their homes as the elven army approached. Those who stayed outside watched with curious eyes as the forest folk marched by in great numbers. It was not as though they had not seen elves before, as the forest was close by, and the Elcadians often traveled to Ursul cities in times of peace. But they had never seen so many of them at once. There were some minor skirmishes outside the village as Ursul guards attempted to stop the elves from entering Ambrose. The army stationed in the town was a small, poorly trained one, and offered little resistance. Once the elven army had gained control of Ambrose, it was up to Tamark to gain control of his people. The townspeople gathered in the streets to hear what the invaders had to say. Dyaxes nudged Tamark, who seemed rather overwhelmed at the sight of the crowd. "This is your moment, lad," the Teluvian commander said. "It is now or never." I do not think I can do it," Tamark said in a nervous stammer. "Now is not the time to lose heart, my friend," Dyaxes warned. "Remember the reasons why you are here. Do not let the suffering of your sister and all those who have died in the name of both of our countries be in vain. Up until this moment, you have been king in name only. Now, it is time for you to act like the mighty leader you are destined to become. If Ursulus is ever to be free from tyranny, You must be strong." Diax's words stirred the young king's heart. With a fire in his eyes, Tamar turned and faced the crowd. "Good people of Ambrose, 2 years ago, the wicked Urkai murdered my father, King Ulrich, and claimed the throne of Ursulus for his own." There was much mumbling among the onlookers as the exiled heir to the Ursul throne revealed his identity. Gone was the trembling in the young king's voice. He spoke with great conviction, and his voice roared over the murmuring of the crowd. "Since the beginning of his unjust reign, Urkai has increased your taxes twofold and burdened you to the point of slavery. He sends soldiers to your city. He says they are here to protect you, while in truth they serve to protect him from you. Look around you. You are prisoners in your own city, victims of Urkai's every whim. He treats you like cattle, lowly beasts, sweating beneath his heavy yoke so that he and his army can live in riches while you wallow in poverty. He uses his army to instill fear in you so that you will not question his rule. But I say you shall live in fear no more. You saw how easily my army defeated the city guards. Why, most of those traveling with me are not even soldiers. Many have never raised a weapon before in their lives. They are common people, just like you, people who are sick of being oppressed by this tyrant. Our plan is to march all the way to Ursus to bring Urkai to justice, but we cannot do it alone. We need your help and the help of all the people of Ursulus who are equal victims of Urkai's treachery. The time has come to rise up and take a stand. You can either stay here and continue to live like dogs, or you can follow us and watch Urkai cower before those he has tormented from behind a shield of armored henchmen. The choice is yours." The power of Tamar's words rallied the crowd. For the first time since Urkai took power, the people of Ursulus voiced their deep hatred for the evil monarch. Chants of death to Urkai echoed throughout the streets as the townspeople shook their fists in anger. "Well done," Diaxis said to the young king. "It amazes me how much you act beyond your years. With the talents you possess, you are surely destined to become a great leader." "Circumstances have forced me to mature quickly," Tamar said grimly. "I know you have faced many painful situations in your short life," Diaxis said. "I fear you will have to face even more before this is all over." "I have learned to live with pain," Tamar said stoically. "I believe it has made me stronger." The following days were spent in similar fashion. The elven army would march into a town, subduing any Ursul soldiers, and then Tamar would rally the people behind him. With each town, this task became easier, as word of the rebellion spread like wildfire across the countryside. The path of the army traced the northern coast of the Elcadian Sea. Several Ursul cities dotted the shore in relatively close proximity. By late evening of the third day, the rebel forces had reached the town of Chalcis, about 2 hours from the densely populated city of Ivansport. Taking Ivansport would be a major victory for the rebels, but it would also be very dangerous. The next day, the military leaders gathered to discuss their strategy. Scouts had been sent ahead earlier that morning to view the city's defenses. The news they brought back with them would determine the course of action the rebels would take. One thing was clear: the rebellion would have to move quickly, while emotions were still running high. When the scouts finally returned, the tidings they brought with them were not promising. Hundreds of Ursul soldiers surrounded the city in anticipation of an invasion. It appeared word of the rebel army's movement had reached Ivansport in enough time to allow a formidable defense to be raised. "What do we do now?" Tamar asked, in despair. "Urkai expects us to attack Ivansport, so that is what we will do," Diaxis replied. "But he has a large army there," the king argued. "We will be routed for sure. You underestimate the ability and desire of your people," Diaxis countered. "The people of Ivansport are no doubt just as angry with Urkai as we are. Once they see our army march into the city, they will join us. 1,000 soldiers will not last long against 5,000 angry citizens." "So you think we should march on the city at once?" Tamar asked. "Yes, but not all of us," Diaxis replied. "Cerebus and I will lead the elven army to Ivansport." "What about me?" Ectheon asked. You will accompany King Tamark and his rebel army to Ursus, Dyaxis answered. Do you really think it is a good idea to divide the army? Tamark asked skeptically. I agree that from a traditional strategic standpoint, it sounds most unwise, Dyaxis conceded. But our ultimate success depends as much on psychology as it does brute force. You must also remember that while it is my wish to see you restored to your throne, my true reason for being here is to save Teluvia. If Urkai believes that his two greatest cities, Ursus and Ivansport, are in peril, he will be compelled to call back his army from Teluvia. And if Aldred and his sharpshooters do their job, the Ursals will be forced to run a bloody gauntlet to get here. I understand your plan, but I must admit there is much about it that worries me, Tamark said. Do not fear, Tamark, Dyaxis said. Cerebus and I will take Ivansport. You and Ectheon need only to lay siege to Ursus and await our arrival. Then together we will storm the city and restore you to your rightful place. Dyaxis' promises of victory brought Ectheon little comfort as he watched his brother and the commander set off for Ivansport. The prospect that he would never see either one of them again was very real, despite the commander's confident words. And the hope that he would see his homeland again seemed more remote than ever as he marched north to the heavily fortified capital of the Urzal Empire. But despite the fear and loneliness he now felt, Ectheon was glad that Dyaxis had chosen him to accompany Tamark to Ursus. His feelings stemmed from the prospect of rescuing the beautiful Princess Sarah from her captivity in the dungeons of Ursus. He found it odd that during all of their planning, no mention had been made of her fate. He felt compelled to press Tamark on this matter as he walked beside him. What will become of your sister once Urkai sees us surrounding Ursus? Ectheon asked. It is my hope and my belief that Urkai will not harm her, Tamark said. You see, Ectheon, my uncle may play the part of a tyrant quite well, but inside he is a coward. He will hold on to Sarah and use her as a bargaining chip for his own personal safety. I would not put it past him to hide behind her skirt to save his miserable life. Your sister sounds like a very remarkable person, Ectheon said. What is she like? Sarah is not like most maidens, Tamark explained. To look at her, you would think that she is like all other princesses, well-mannered and very ladylike. And very beautiful, Ectheon added. Yes, she is among the fairest in the land, the young king continued, but there is much more to her than that. Her worries and concerns are far greater than planning the next dinner party or choosing which gown to wear at the ball. She is not afraid to voice her views about the weightiest matters facing the kingdom. In most countries, such brash behavior from a young maiden would not be tolerated. But father respected her opinions and always lent an open ear whenever she had something to say. Mother, on the other hand, thought that Sarah should leave the business of running the country to the men and pursue more feminine activities instead. That was how my uncle felt. The first thing Urkai did when he came to power was to exclude Sarah from any activities pertaining to the government. Well, Sarah would not be discouraged so easily. She had friends in high places, and they would constantly inform her of what was going on behind Urkai's closed doors. But after a few months, things changed. Urkai was growing powerful. He had gained the loyalty of the army by offering them an abundance of wealth. He arranged convenient accidents for the members of the cabinet who had been loyal to my father, just as he had arranged the death of my parents. He replaced these honest men with his corrupt military leaders, guaranteeing himself total control of the kingdom. When Sarah learned of this, she started the rebellion. She encouraged my father's youngest brother, Tolmark, to confront Urkai. The result was a bloody revolt that nearly disposed Urkai, but ultimately failed, bringing about Tolmark's death and an even tighter grip on the kingdom by the army. Sarah, having made herself known as a threat to Urkai, was forced to flee to Elcadia, where she was welcomed with open arms. You pretty much know the rest of the story from there. I find it odd that you make no mention of a man willing to stand as the princess's champion, Ectheon said. Surely someone has won her heart, a lord or a knight, no doubt. Sarah was indeed in love with a knight, Tamark replied. Sir Delen was his name. Indeed, I think she would have married him if she had never learned the truth about him. The truth? Ectheon asked. Delenn betrayed my sister, Tamark explained. The matter is a source of great pain for her, and she has kept it closely guarded. I myself know little about it, except that it involved the death of our parents. I also suspect that Urkai's daughter Celia played a part in it, for Sarah harbors a deep hatred for her. I have guessed your intentions, Ectheon, and so I would have you know that Delenn's betrayal has forever scarred my sister. It has hardened her heart. Do not get me wrong, she's not a cold person. It is just that she shows no interest in romance anymore, and I fear she never will. Delenn betrayed her trust in such a terrible fashion that I do not think she can ever trust a man again, at least not enough to fall in love with him. You are a kind and noble person, very worthy of my sister's affection. But I fear it would be easier for you to storm the gates of Ursus on your own than to win Sarah's heart.